The Iron Grip, Vladimir Putin's rise and reign in a dystopian Russia. In the shadow of the 20th century's collapse, Russia emerged from the ashes of the Soviet Union as a fractured, disillusioned nation. The 1990s were a time of chaos, marked by economic collapse, rampant corruption, and the rise of oligarchs who plundered the nation's wealth. It was in this dystopian landscape that Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer with a penchant for control, ascended to power. His rise was not merely a political phenomenon, but a calculated orchestration of fear, manipulation, and authoritarianism. Over 2 decades, Putin has transformed Russia into a modern dystopia, where the constitution is a malleable tool, corruption is the lifeblood of the regime, and murder is a silent enforcer of loyalty. The rise of Putin, from obscurity to omnipotence. Now, before we move on, please help a small channel grow. Please like and subscribe. If you have any comments, good or bad, leave them below. Back to the story. Putin's ascent began in the final days of the Soviet Union, where he served as a KGB operative in East Germany. His career in intelligence shaped his worldview, instilling in him a deep distrust of democracy and a belief in the necessity of strong, centralized control. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, Putin returned to Russia, navigating the chaotic post-Soviet landscape with a blend of opportunism and ruthlessness. In 1999, President Boris Yeltsin, ailing and unpopular, appointed Putin as prime minister. Yeltsin's inner circle saw Putin as a loyal enforcer who could protect their interests. Little did they know that they were handing power to a man who would soon eclipse them all. When Yeltsin resigned on December 31, 1999, Putin became acting president. His rise was swift and decisive, bolstered by a carefully crafted image of strength and stability. Putin's early years in power were marked by a calculated consolidation of control. He presented himself as a savior, a strong man who could restore order to a nation in disarray. The Second Chechen War, which began in 1999, served as a backdrop for his rise. Putin's ruthless handling of the conflict, marked by brutal military tactics and a disregard for civilian casualties, cemented his reputation as a leader who would stop at nothing to maintain control. The erosion of democracy, constitutional changes, and authoritarian rule. Putin's Russia is a dystopia where democracy exists in name only. The Constitution, once a symbol of post-Soviet hope, has been repeatedly altered to serve the interests of the regime. In 2008, facing term limits that would have forced him to step down, Putin orchestrated a constitutional amendment to extend the presidential term from 4 to 6 years. This change allowed him to remain in power while maintaining the facade of legality. In 2020, Putin pushed through another set of constitutional amendments, effectively resetting his term limits and allowing him to remain president until 2036. These changes were ratified through a dubious national vote, widely criticized as neither free nor fair. The amendments also enshrined conservative social values, such as the definition of marriage as between a man and a woman, further entrenching the regime's authoritarian ideology. The constitutional changes were not merely about extending Putin's rule. They were about dismantling the last vestiges of democratic accountability. The judiciary, once an independent branch of government, has been subordinated to the executive. Opposition parties have been systematically marginalized, their leaders harassed, imprisoned, or killed. The media, once a vibrant, if imperfect institution, has been transformed into a propaganda machine, broadcasting the regime's narrative while silencing dissent. Corruption, the lifeblood of the regime. Corruption is the lifeblood of Putin's Russia, a dystopian system where power and wealth are concentrated in the hands of a few. The oligarchs, who amassed vast fortunes during the chaotic 1990s, were brought to heel through a combination of coercion and co-optation. Those who resisted, such as Mikhail Khodorkovsky, were imprisoned or exiled. Those who complied were allowed to keep their wealth, provided they remained loyal to the regime. Putin himself is widely believed to be one of the wealthiest men in the world, though the true extent of his fortune is hidden behind a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. His inner circle, known as the siloviki, is composed of former intelligence officers and loyalists who control key sectors of the economy. Together, they have turned the Russian state into a kleptocracy, where public resources are plundered for private gain. Corruption permeates every level of society, from the highest echelons of power to the lowest rungs of the bureaucracy. Bribes are a fact of life, necessary to navigate a system where the rule of law is a mere fiction. The result is a society riven by inequality, where the elite live in opulence, while ordinary citizens struggle to make ends meet. Murder as a tool of control in Putin's Russia. Murder is not merely a crime, it is a tool of statecraft. The regime has a long and bloody history of eliminating its enemies, both at home and abroad. Journalists, activists, and opposition politicians who dare to challenge the regime often meet untimely ends. Their deaths are rarely investigated, and when they are, the findings are often shrouded in obfuscation and lies. The assassination of Alexander Litvinenko in 2006 was a stark reminder of the regime's reach. Litvinenko, a former FSB officer turned critic of Putin, was poisoned with polonium-210, a rare and highly toxic substance. His murder, carried out on British soil, sent a chilling message to Putin's enemies: no one is safe. The 2015 murder of Boris Nemtsov, a prominent opposition leader, further underscored the regime's brutality. Nemtsov was shot dead in broad daylight near the Kremlin, a brazen act of intimidation that sent shockwaves through the opposition. While low-level perpetrators were convicted, the masterminds behind the murder remain at large, shielded by the regime. The use of murder as a tool of control extends beyond Russia's borders. The 2018 poisoning of Sergei Skripal, a former Russian spy living in the UK, and the 2020 poisoning of Alexei Navalny, Russia's most prominent opposition leader, are testament to the regime's willingness to use violence to silence its critics. Navalny's survival, against all odds, has made him a symbol of resistance, but his imprisonment and the crackdown on his supporters show the lengths to which the regime will go to maintain its grip on power. The cult of personality, propaganda, and control in a dystopian society. Control is not merely physical, it is psychological. Putin's regime has cultivated a cult of personality, portraying him as the embodiment of Russian strength and resilience. State-controlled media churn out a steady stream of propaganda, glorifying Putin while demonizing his enemies. His image is everywhere, from billboards to television screens, a constant reminder of his omnipresence. The regime's propaganda machine is not merely about glorifying Putin, it is about shaping reality. The annexation of Crimea in 2014, for example, was portrayed as a triumphant restoration of Russian greatness rather than a violation of international law. The war in Ukraine, which began in 2022, is framed as a defensive struggle against Western aggression rather than an unprovoked invasion. The cult of personality serves a dual purpose. It reinforces Putin's authority while undermining dissent. By presenting himself as the savior of the nation, Putin marginalizes his critics, casting them as traitors or foreign agents. The result is a society where dissent is not merely suppressed, it is stigmatized. The future of Putin's dystopia. As Putin's reign enters its third decade, the future of Russia remains uncertain. The regime's grip on power appears unshakable, but cracks are beginning to show. Economic stagnation, widespread corruption, and the brutal suppression of dissent have fueled growing discontent. The war in Ukraine, with its heavy human and economic costs, has further strained the regime's legitimacy. Yet, in a dystopian society, change is never easy. The regime's control over the levers of power, the security services, the media, the judiciary, makes it difficult for opposition movements to gain traction. The memory of the Soviet Union's collapse and the chaos that followed looms large in the Russian psyche, making many wary of radical change. Putin's Russia is a dystopia where the constitution is a tool of oppression, corruption is the norm, and murder is a means of control. It is a society where fear reigns and dissent is crushed. Yet, even in the darkest of times, there is hope. The bravery of activists like Alexei Navalny, the resilience of independent journalists, and the courage of ordinary citizens who dare to speak out are reminders that the human spirit cannot be extinguished. In the end, the story of Putin's Russia is not merely a tale of authoritarianism, it is a testament to the enduring struggle for freedom and justice. The road ahead is long and fraught with peril, but as long as there are those who dare to resist, the possibility of a brighter future remains. Please like and subscribe.